I don't know if I'm going to make a video right now. I'm just going to talk and I'll see what happens. But I was thinking about something. I've been thinking about a lot of things. I don't want to talk about death, but people dying. But, there was a death last week of someone who mattered to me a great deal. And here's the thing, that in life, we don't think about things very much until people die. But I think I've been fortunate in a certain way, in that I've learned to look at things, before things happen. Sometimes we can move from this limited dimension through imagination. And I've always been a person who used my imagination. That's why I understand Einstein's point when he said imagination is more important than knowledge. See, if you imagine what you're going to do tomorrow, that's not what you know. You don't know what you're going to do tomorrow. You don't know. You don't know. You freaking don't know what you're going to do tomorrow. But you do know that you imagine it. You know you imagine it. And so you have these images. So that becomes part of the thing. The other thing is this. We can imagine things a certain way. I was thinking about something when I was in England. It wasn't the last time I was in England, but the time before that. When I went there in 2003, because I went there in 2009. That time I was in England. I was in London for only a few hours. But one of the things I remember was going to Buckingham Palace. And I remember sort of having this feeling, when I was in the palace, of the royalness. It's just this feeling you get. Royalty is a feeling. It's a feeling you get. You can't even describe it. And I felt it. I felt this royalness wash over me because this is a very royal place. And now, people might say, well, yeah, that's just imagination or whatever. And you know what? In truth, it is. But, it felt really nice. It felt really good. And I get to thinking that those are feelings that we generate in our minds. We generate that. I was thinking that what if I had met Queen Elizabeth in that moment? I'd probably been, I could say all kind of things like, oh, this stuff is this and this, that, and whatever. I would have been shaken and nervous, and I'd been trying to act proper and everything. I would. It's because it's the same feeling I get when I've met celebrities. When I've actually met someone who is like a celebrity. It's like, you could say all this stuff, all these people, they're just regular people, and the newspapers hype them up. And then when you meet them, you're like, you don't know what to say. But it's all a matter of how our minds process things. It's imaginary. Yes, it's imagination. But we can actually deliberately generate this. We can deliberately do it. I was thinking about something. And there's a video. Maybe I should make a link to it, but I'm too lazy. This video about happiness. It is written by this guy named Daniel Gilbert. If you know that name, you know the book that he wrote, and you know the thing he did on one of the TED events. The TED things that they have. I don't even know what you call that. And he was, a book called Stumbled Onto Happiness. And he was talking about how we synthesize happiness. And we synthesize a lot of feelings. See, royalty is a synthetic thing. It's something our minds create. Just like specialness is something our minds create. And I get to thinking last week, well, actually not last week, a few days ago when I was at a funeral. Some of my friends are probably watching. But the thing is that, we always talk about people in a very special way when they die. But, we don't think about that when they're alive. At that moment, we say so many special things to people. We tell them how much they meant in our lives and how important they were. that feeling of specialness comes from the way we talk about people, from the way we think about people. But we only choose to think in certain occasions. We choose to think about people if they're getting married, if they're dying, or if they're dead, or some other thing, and then we think about them in a special way. But we don't do it every day. I was thinking about something, and I was thinking about everyday things. How we get bored with stuff. I remember when I used to always want to have a computer back before I had one. I thought these things were just totally amazing. And you know what? I still feel the same way. And I think what's interesting is how to maintain that feeling. There's so much advice out there. There's good advice. There's a lot of good advice out there. As much as we have a lot of people throwing out a lot of bullshit, there's a lot of good advice out there. And one thing I learned, something that Aldous Huxley said about how to look at things and have this feeling of awe. Really how to sort of synthesize it, how to generate it. But I'm not going to give instructions on how to do that. You can look up that stuff. I'm not a teacher, so people can look up stuff. I'm too lazy, so nobody should ever follow what I'm saying. I'm just saying things right now. That's all. The thing is that you can look at things differently. I'm fascinated every time, I know I talk a lot about squirrels all the time, but I'm just fascinated with them. I can watch them a million years and never get tired of watching how they play and how they do things and everything that they do. I never get tired of it. I never get tired of going to the beach and watching the waves in the water from Lake Michigan. I never get tired of looking at the clouds. Now, how can you have this sense of newness? I think about something that Richard Feynman was talking about. Looking at the world as if you were trying to explain the world to someone from another place, like an extraterrestrial. Some aliens came here and they wanted to know how everything worked. And, the everyday things that we have to explain it. And then when you do that, in that process of explaining it, all of a sudden you see the old things that you have, the things you have. You see them in a new way. See, that's part of how our mind does it. You never really think about things until you start explaining it to people who don't have it. Now, I've had situations when I've had to deal with people from other countries in places where, places that are very poor. And you try to explain to people things that you have that you even take for granted. You don't even think about them. You try to explain that to people. I was thinking about something that someone said. Some news person, and I don't remember who it was, a very well-known guy. He was talking about something based on some survey or statistical fact about the world. That that half of the people on Earth, there's 6 or 7 billion people on Earth. Do you know that half of the people on Earth, and I'm sure this would be mostly in poor countries, in places in Africa and other places where, in very rural areas, and a lot of places. Do you know that half of the people on Earth have never used a telephone? I'm not talking like half of the people on Earth don't own a telephone. That's not what I'm saying. Half of the people on Earth have never used a telephone. That's an interesting thought. That's very interesting. So if you met that half of the people who've never used one, they may know what a telephone is. They may have even seen one. There may be one in their town or village, or maybe their neighbor have one, but they themselves have never used one. Can you imagine what it would be like for them to use something that you use every day for the first time? Whenever you do something for the first time, you see it so different. I remember the first time I drove a car. After all these years of sitting in a car, being a passenger, you see this thing, and there it is, and for the first time, you're experiencing it. It all has to do with the way your mind is processing this stuff. that newness feeling, because you have to now interact with it in a different way. When you have to think about people, when you think about people, not when you have to, when people die, you think about them different than when they're alive. But I've learned, and I have learned this too, to think about people in that same way before they die. Not think of them as dead, but think of that about, think about what it is you appreciate in people. Learn. Think about what it is you appreciate even in yourself. When you have a health problem, for example, like my health issues, and I get to thinking, when I was a kid, when I was younger, and I could sit down and eat a big bag of candy. Like I get a big bag of chocolates and I could eat it, and didn't have to take any medicine or didn't have to worry about my blood sugar. And now I have to be careful. I have to think about it. I have to match up the amount of insulin with, when you didn't have it, you saw it one way. But, it's kind of strange. What's so weird now is that it takes a lot less of things to give me satisfaction. Like, I could be like 100 times more satisfied with 1/4 of a cup of ice cream than I could have been with 2 gallons of ice cream. Why? Because I pay attention. I pay attention to it. I just pay attention to every detail, every bite, everything. And it's the way I'm thinking about it. I changed a lot of the way I think about things and realized that you can have just as intense of an experience with a small amount of something than you can with a lot. Some people, you can give them $20 and they can have more enjoyment out of $20 than they could have with other people that you can give them $20 million. And they get less enjoyment. It's not because of the amount of money. It's because of the way they think about it. If you change the way you think about things, you really do change things. This is not magic. It's not supernatural. It's just thinking different. Just thinking different. I think in the past I would use a word like positive thinking, but then I get to realizing that whenever you use that word, some people kind of go nuts when you say that. But I guess in essence, it is a more detailed way of saying positive thinking. Learn to appreciate. That's all. See, happiness comes when you learn to actually appreciate everything that exists, everything that you already have. Not hoping for the next thing. I'm enjoying this present cup of coffee, but there are cups of coffee in the future. I'm just enjoying this one right now. I'm not going to worry about the next one. That's the thing. Appreciate the people in your life now. Instead of worrying about, if only I had this person, what about the one that's right in front of you? It's just a thought. That's all. Just some thoughts.